Hey, welcome to A Weekly Quest. I'm really excited to be here, and I hope you are as well. I started A Weekly Quest a few years ago as I was doing a study of questions in the Bible. And so a few years ago, I began to just post on my website in written form, study around different questions in the Bible. But I thought I'd do something a little bit different, and maybe I'll present this in video form as well as in written form on the website. So if you're curious about previous posts, you can just go to maryselzer.com and you'll be able to find some previous weekly quests. But I hope you're enjoying this new format. So what I'd like you to do, each week we'll look at a different question in the Bible. And I really encourage you to read the scripture around the question so you kind of have the full context of it. And then I'll try to leave each weekly quest with one more question for you to think about and consider. So I hope you find these enriching, and just take time to maybe post your comments, your insights, your experiences, something you maybe disagree with. And I do my best to respond to anyone who leaves a comment. So this week we're going to look at a question. It's found in John 18, and I'd like for you to read in the entire chapter of John 18 and also read Romans chapter 1. So those are two chapters that I'd like you to consider. But the question we're going to look at is found in John 18:38. The question is, what is truth? And it's actually a question that Pilate asked Jesus. And I've been thinking about what is truth lately. Not too long ago, I saw a girl who was wearing a t-shirt that said, "Speak your truth." And I looked at that and I thought, what is the operative word there? Is the operative word your, or is the operative word truth? Like, speak your truth, kind of like speak your mind. And I was thinking, so if a bunch of people are sitting together in a room and they all want to speak their truth, who determines what is truth? Because what if my truth, what if I believe is different from what you believe? So what really is truth? And I think we're kind of getting into a time where people are having difficulty discerning truth from fiction. So in John 18, you'll read where Jesus was standing before Pilate, and Pilate knew that Jesus was innocent. I mean, he was very biased against Jesus, but he knew that he was innocent. But he knew that the people wanted him to find Jesus guilty. So Pilate's in a quandary. Do I please the people to keep their popularity, or do I just bring accusations against an innocent man? So Pilate asked Jesus if he really was the king of the Jews. And this is how Jesus responded. He said, "My kingdom wasn't of this world. I came into the world to testify to the truth. And everyone on the side of truth listens to me." And when Jesus said that, Pilate very flippantly said, "What is truth?" And then he abruptly walked away, went out and he faced the people, and he gave the people a choice. First he said, this man is innocent, but it was Passover, and the custom was that a prisoner could be released, and they could have released Jesus, but instead they said, "Release Barabbas." And Pilate, said, well, he's innocent, but he did go ahead and release Barabbas and kept Jesus under arrest. So they didn't choose truth because they couldn't discern truth. So there are two reasons that people can't discern truth. There are probably more than two, but I want to just talk about two today. One is pride. It's because people don't want to know the truth. They've held onto a belief or a mindset for so long, no matter how incorrect it is, they still believe it. But if they accept the truth, if they listen to logic or to reason or to fact, they'd have to admit that they were wrong. And that's humbling. It's kind of like the Pharisees in Jesus' time who were convinced, and they convinced others, that Jesus was not the Messiah. Their emotions, their pride kept them all riled up, and they became argumentative and they became angry. And Jesus was just matter of fact, but they would argue and among themselves, and they'd argue with Jesus, they'd argue with other people. Even after they witnessed countless miracles, they heard the teachings, they were in the presence of Jesus himself, and they couldn't accept the truth. But Nicodemus was a Pharisee, but he was an open-minded Pharisee who sought understanding. And the Bible tells us, I think it's in John 3, where Nicodemus talked to Jesus privately, and he wanted understanding. He wanted to hear another side of the story. And it takes a degree of humility to seek understanding, because once we learn that our stubborn mindset is wrong, we'll probably have to change our ways. And we may have to offer an apology. We might have to forgive someone, or we may have to interact with people differently. Let me share a personal story of a mindset that I had that was so wrong, but I believed it was so right. I was raised to believe that biracial marriages were a sin. Biracial, particularly between African American and Caucasian. I can't tell you where that belief came from or how it got ingrained in my thinking, but for years I really believed that. Shortly after my husband and I were married, we had attended church, and a biracial couple attended. And after church, we were driving home, and my husband said, did you get to meet that new couple? They're really nice. And I said, they might be nice, but they're living in sin. And my husband said, how do you figure? And I said, they're biracial. He's black, she's white, and they're living in sin. And my husband said, no, they're not. And I said, yes, they are. I said, biracial marriages are a sin. And my husband said, no, they're not. And I said, yes, they are. Well, then my husband had to bring out the big guns. And he said, show me in Scripture where it says that it is a sin for African American to be married to Caucasian. And I was stuck there, but in my stubbornness, I said, well, there has to be something. It's got to be in there somewhere. And my husband said, I can show you a scripture that says that Moses was in a biracial marriage, and Miriam and Aaron, his brother and sister, criticized him, and they got in trouble for it. And that just took the air out of my balloon. But now I was at a crossroads, because I could either accept the fact, especially the scriptural fact of my belief has been wrong, or I could stubbornly hold on to what I had believed for years. Fortunately, I made the choice to, if scripture says this, then I have to let this wrong thinking go and not have it based on emotion, but have it based on fact, especially scriptural fact. And it's a good thing I did, because several years later, my husband and I moved to the Detroit area, where we pastored a church and had a number of biracial couples. Can you imagine if I had come in as a leader in that church with that mindset? You are living in sin. And so pride is going to keep us from seeking understanding or even wanting to know the truth of a long-held belief. But here's the thing, if we don't deal with that pride issue, we may fall into the second reason why people cannot discern truth. And the second reason is they're caught in a delusion. They've lost the ability to discern truth from lie. In Romans 1, Paul warns that people who love to lie, or who love to believe a lie, may subject themselves even to a stronger delusion. And if you think about it, that's really, I think, what we're seeing in the world today, where people are making up their own truth and they want to hold on to it, and they're losing their ability to even discern right from wrong. And this is something that we really need to guard our hearts against, and that we really need to pray that God will just change the hearts of people, and that truth, especially Jesus, will be recognized and believed. Isaiah 59:14 says, truth has stumbled in the public square, and honesty cannot enter Truth is missing. So you might say, well, how do I know if I'm believing something that's not true? Well, here's one way that you can. If your emotions eclipse logic, then you might be holding on to something that really is not factual. Somebody said that we will argue the most about what we know the least. And if we find that we have to argue in an emotional way, we become angry, we become irrational, just to hold on to a certain belief that maybe we have kept for years, but we've never bothered to fact check it, then that could be a fact that we have a mindset that needs to be changed, and we need to ask God to change that. Thinking back to Jesus and the Pharisees, Jesus was just very logical, very factual. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the light of the world. I am the bread of life. And the Pharisees, all emotional and all angry and all argumentative. But Jesus is like, you know what? I am who I am, and it is what it is. So here's a question I'd like to leave with you this week. What belief do you have that is being held in place by emotional bias and not fact? Don't let pride anchor that belief deep in your heart, but ask God to give you some clear understanding so you will know what is truth. Remember, you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. I've enjoyed being with you. I hope you enjoy this quest. Again, read John 18, read Romans 1, and I will see you next week. Have a good one.